Road Rash is the first in a series of combat motorcycle racers released by EA for the Sega Genesis in 1991. It was one of a handful of games that helped establish the Genesis with an edgy reputation in contrast to Nintendo's consoles. The original Road Rash, viewed in a vacuum, is more of a proof of concept than anything else. Being amongst the first of its kind meant that it had a lot of rough edges. It was also one of the first 5 games that EA developed internally for the Genesis, so it had room to grow technically. Its uniqueness glossed over its shortcomings. Road Rash has only one simple game mode. You pick a track and you race. You have 15 opponents, and they all have names and even a bit of personality, care of pre-race quotes. You start at level 1, but you can ride any of the game's 5 tracks from the instant you enter the main menu. If you finish in the top 3 in each of the 5 tracks, you progress to the next level, up to 5. Higher levels have longer versions of the same tracks, but with more obstacles. Passwords are used to track your progress. Each track has its twists and turns, but they are generally pretty easy to maneuver. There are cops on the road that can arrest you, but they are also easy to avoid. There are obstacles off the sides of the road that can knock you off your bike, and they can be difficult to avoid in tricky situations. Those tricky situations are usually caused by the most terrifying enemy of Road Rash: regular drivers. As you traverse the California-based tracks, you will have to deal with drivers in your lane and oncoming drivers. Despite being cast as a member of an edgy outlaw biker gang, you'd best stay in the right lane. You have fractions of a second to dodge an oncoming driver, but plenty of time to deal with a driver in the right lane. So while you are dodging and weaving and taking part in a violent road race, observe the proper rules of the road. Hitting cars damages your bike significantly, and it can wreck it bad enough to fail a race. As you progress in the game, this will become more and more of a problem. You slowly gain money by finishing races, which you can use to buy better bikes, but you have to pay to fix bike damage. You can also slowly gain personal enjoyment by punching and kicking the fuck out of your fellow racers, and sometimes even use weapons you stole from them, which was 90% of the reason kids played Road Rash in the first place. It was that game where you fight people on motorcycles, a game unlike any before it. It was also a pretty looking game, showcasing hills and a really deep draw distance not seen in racing games of the time. But man, is the frame rate consistently terrible. It's easily the worst part of the game. There are very few times where the game seems smooth, and that's when there are no other riders near you and very little track decoration. In other words, the most boring parts of the game. It never quite feels like you have full control of your bike as a result, and yet somehow control isn't really a problem. Sometimes you feel as though you were sucked into a collision with a car, but otherwise you somehow have enough control of your bike to maneuver the tracks easily. I wouldn't be surprised if there is some kind of assistance going on. Either way, it doesn't impact gameplay. Traversing the courses and avoiding obstacles is well within your ability. Road Rash's music is an acquired taste. It fits with the sound of EA's Genesis music of the time. Deep, rough, electronic farts. At its best, it's capable of creating intensity. Here it does a very rough approximation of the grunge music it would actually license in later sequels. It works, however they did it. Whatever EA used to create its Genesis music was horribly fantastic. Road Rash is a game that feels like it is barely being held together at the seams. Everything works, but just barely. It was good enough to be an iconic, differentiating title for the Genesis. Gamers at the time loved it for letting them do something they'd never done in a game before. and it was left to the sequels to fine-tune everything.